Okay.
All
But
right.
people
You're
will begin, we're live right now. Okay, people will begin logging in and they will be able to see and hear us. And so do I have permission now,
You
Emmy?
can share your screen whenever you like.
Okay, here we go. We're gonna run our promo. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit, the topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Very good. So in just another minute or two, we will get the countdown clock. Actually, I'll go ahead and share my screen so that it's queued up and ready to go. And then we will begin it in just a couple minutes.
Beautiful live stream.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you here.
Well, I'm honored to be here. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Jeff. You're such a wonderful friend to have me on your show so many times.
And I hope many, many more times, Lori.
That'll be so fun. I keep thinking of ways that we could collaborate and do so many fun things.
Mhm.
Well, we are today for sure, but yes, I love that idea. And you two live near each other, so that's convenient.
It is. It is convenient. It's really wonderful. I love that emblem. I love your logo. It's so pretty. So you can tell by the way I dress, I love bright colors.
Yeah.
So
I got
people,
this for Christmas.
oh, it's beautiful on you.
Thanks. It's all hand woven and has all this amazing embroidery on it. It's like a piece of art. It's like wearing art.
Yes.
Mhm.
It looks fabulous on you.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so here we go. And I see that people are chatting in from all different locations from around the world. And so it's fun if people want to continue to do that and just let us know where you're joining from. We have people from Oregon, Scotland, Switzerland, Alabama, Argentina, Minnesota, New Mexico.
Well, Lori, you have a big following all over the world too. And I imagine you posted the announcement as well.
Yes, yes, we sure did, and sent it out. So hopefully some people are joining in.
So we'll probably get many of your students.
That would be great. I'm mesmerized by your logo. I can't think of it, especially as
Well,
it's coming
I have to give credit to, and I'm sorry, Anderson Chadwick or Chadwick Anderson. I get always so confused by which is the first name and which is the last. Is it Anderson Chadwick, Emmy?
It's Anderson Chadwick, yes.
Who he is a viewer who lives in Australia. And we have an earlier version of the logo, which Emmy and I are both wearing. But at one point, Lori, we were doing a live stream and we were showing the earlier version, which I programmed of this animated rainbow yin yang. It's like 20 years old. And I said, I'm sure we can improve it. And I just made a casual remark, and this viewer, Anderson Chadwick, uh, did it. And he sent this to me. He programmed it himself in I forget the programming language, but a sophisticated one, and it's much better than the version that I created using Corel Graphics over 20 years ago.
It's amazing. Those little pointed things are really are really
Mhm.
cool because they have a 3D
Yeah,
effect to them.
yeah. Yeah, the idea is that on the S curve right along the center, ideally the colors across the S curve are always complementary to each other.
Oh, that's so neat. Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's very hard to keep them perfectly complementary all the time, but this version is very close.
Yeah, I would not have known that it wasn't perfect. To me, it looks like it is. It's really beautiful.
It's hypnotic
Yeah.
and vibrant and crisp at the same
Well, I
time.
think of it as sort of a healing image.
I love that. Yeah.
What did you say, Jeffrey? You think of it in what image?
As a healing image,
Oh,
because
yes.
I think color itself is healing. And what you're seeing here, we're running through each half of the yin yang is going through the entire rainbow of colors.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I kind of think it stimulates the chakras.
I think so too. And it certainly stimulates the mind.
Mhm.
Will this live stream be available at any time afterwards
Oh,
for?
yes. We will have well over 1,000 people, I would presume, while we're actually live. But then as soon as we finish the live stream, the archived video goes up. YouTube does that automatically. And typically we have 3 or 4 or 5 times more people watching the archival video.
And that's great. I want to be sure that after it's over, we put up the link to the archival
The
video.
link will remain the same.
Okay, perfect. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting how the rainbow yin yang is the spectrum of light, which many people consider to be consciousness itself.
Oh, that is really, I never heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, at least I interviewed Catherine Shainberg a few times, who is the 800-year lineage holder of the Kabbalah of Light, which is a uh, Jewish mysticism. And I asked her what she feels light is, because she talked about when she would have people go into their own intuition. I was taught to guide people very slowly and get really relaxed and receptive, but she does it very rapidly in this process where it's just imagine light, or have your intention, imagine light, count down a few numbers, and then notice what image comes. And so I asked her, well, what do you think that light is? And she said it was consciousness itself.
My mentor, Arthur M. Young, the author of The Reflexive Universe, said something very similar. And he was very specific. It's photons. He said photons are spirit.
Uh-huh.
And he went into some very, I think Einsteinian arguments to point out that actually photons exist outside of time and space. If you're, as Einstein pointed out, if you're riding along on a photon, let's say
As one does.
yeah. Well, it's impossible. But if it were to happen, and if you did have a watch, the watch would stop because there's no time for a photon. A photon travels from one end of the universe to the other in no time at all, because which really means there's no space either.
Yes. Oh, I love talking about things like this. Is this what we're going to be talking about when we get down to the timer?
Well, it's all our viewers have the opportunity to pose questions, Lori.
Okay.
And we have a team of volunteers who collect those questions in the chat window
Mhm.
of YouTube, because
Oh,
our
okay.
Zoom conversation is being piped over to YouTube. And then we take the best of those questions, and Emmy and I will pose them to you. But you get to make an introductory statement that sort of sets the tone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is titled Advanced Training in Remote Viewing, but you're the guest, and by all means, if there's topics you want to talk about, please do. And people can ask questions related to remote viewing, but of course, remote viewing is also a very, in certain regards, broad topic, right? Because it
It's very
also
much.
deals with consciousness.
It's all about consciousness. And time and space relate so much to remote viewing. We run into it all the time. We run into the conundrums of time and space frequently in remote viewing.
Oh,
Yeah.
fun. Well, that's definitely, I mean, we can continue now, and that's definitely, I'd love to hear, and all the audience, I'm sure, would love to hear your thoughts about that, because you do this all day, every day, right?
All day, every day. That's true.
Mhm.
Yes, remote viewing is my life. That's what I am all about.
Mhm.
Well, including mediumship and hypnosis.
Yes, that's true too. Although we don't practice hypnosis, I mean, we don't have a hypnosis practice anymore.
Uh-huh.
So, but
But correct me if I'm wrong, I have the impression that your work is strongly influenced by the time you spent working in hypnosis.
actually, the hypnosis was more influenced by the time I spent studying remote viewing.
Okay.
I've always looked at it that way
Uh-huh.
because I had never gotten into hypnosis until 2001. So that's when I started studying hypnosis, but I had been into remote viewing for 5 or 6 years by that time.
What did you feel a need to go into hypnosis at that point?
To be honest, I was interested in it, and because of the effects of 9/11, my boss said, "Hey, you're a single mom, and I don't think we're going to make it through this. I think we're going to fold, and you're going to be out of a job. So come up with a backup plan in case you lose your job." Because my boss and I were very close friends, and so my backup plan was to go study hypnosis and open a hypnosis business. And I didn't lose my job, when they didn't fold. So I was doing both simultaneously. I was doing my job during the day, and then by night I was a hypnotherapist, and on weekends I was a hypnotherapist.
Well, actually, that's an amazing story in and of itself, which to me is the story of how you discovered that by studying marketing, you could create a very successful practice as a remote viewing trainer.
That's true.
Probably more successful than anyone else that I know of, at least engaged in that work.
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. That makes me feel good. It's been a lot of work. It's been an uphill climb, but yeah, I'm really grateful, and I have the most wonderful students.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. I'm live with my co-host, Emmy Vadnais, and our live stream guest today, Lori Williams. Lori has been a guest many times on New Thinking Aloud. She is clearly one of the foremost trainers of remote viewing in the world today. She's a certified remote viewing trainer under the tutelage of Lynn Buchanan. She trains CRV. Lori has also talked previously on New Thinking Aloud about her experiences in hypnosis and her experiences as a trance medium. She offers advanced training in remote viewing. She is the author of a book on the remote viewing monitor. She's also very deeply involved in applied projects in remote viewing, training people to work professionally as remote viewers, working on projects typically for government and for industry. Welcome, Lori. What a joy to be with you.
Oh, it's a joy to be here with you too. Normally, I spend my Sundays, just reading or going for walks with the dog or whatever. So it's really it's really a joy to be able to be here and talking with brilliant minds, especially like yours, Jeffrey, and to get to meet Emmy. Emmy, I'm so glad I get to meet you, and I'm always honored to be part of anything that you're doing, Jeffrey. I'm always excited about it. So
Well, the
welcome,
feeling
everyone.
is mutual.
Thank you.
So
So
nice to be with you, Lori. Yes.
we have titled this program Advanced Training in Remote Viewing. And I know we were very careful to make sure that our viewers understood this is not going to be a training session. This is a New Thinking Aloud live stream where viewers will be able to ask you any questions they want about remote viewing, about advanced training, or about whatever is on their mind or what they would like to know about your life. But one thing we're not going to do, and I want to be very clear, is people are not getting advanced training in remote viewing during the next 90 minutes.
Oh, that's good. It's good that we're clarifying that. I
Mhm.
think that that title came out of a conversation that you and I were having, where I was telling you that a lot of people don't know that we have a 3-year professional remote viewer certification program that we call CRV Pro, and we call it the Fast Track to Excellence in Remote Viewing. And the reason a lot of people don't know about it is because we don't advertise it. We don't tell people about it. We have a number of really highly trained remote viewing coaches who started studying with me many years ago and brought their skill levels to a very high level, and people that I felt had good teaching abilities, because you can't just be a good remote viewer if you're going to be a remote viewing coach. You have to have good teaching abilities as well, and a deep understanding of the multi layers that there are that we discover in consciousness when people have the perseverance and the ability to make it to like the 10th degree black belt level in remote viewing, so to
Mm.
speak, if you were to compare CRV to a martial art. And understandably, people who come in to learn remote viewing, it's a broad base, but it's more like a pyramid, because then the people who go from that broad base to the next level, it's a little smaller group. And the people who go from that level to the next level, a little bit smaller group, all the way until we get to the top of the apex. And that's where we find the people who had the perseverance and the diligence and the discipline to just fight through the battles of overcoming obstacles, especially obstacles that the biggest obstacles being our ego and our self-esteem and things like that, that take hits as we want so badly to be right about everything.
Mm.
Humans, it's human nature. We want to be right about everything. And yet nobody wants to go through that baby stage of stumbling while you're learning to walk and falling down and skidding your knees and having to get up again, right? So that's where we take that group who made it to the apex and say, would you like to become professionals, be featured on our page, and be able to work with other people in whatever area you want to work in? And there's so many fascinating areas that people have found to use remote viewing in.
Mm.
So we can talk about that too. Whatever questions people have, I'm happy to answer. But if people are curious as to what kinds of ways remote viewing is being used now, that might be something we could talk about.
Well, I will say, and it's worth repeating, I suppose. We did an interview not long ago with another remote viewing trainer, Paul Smith, about many misconceptions that people have about remote viewing. And I bring it up because here is a viewer named Luciana Testa, and she asks a question, and I think she's using the term remote viewing in a way that is used popularly. According to Paul Smith, many people use it this way, but remote viewing trainers and professionals and practitioners don't, to my knowledge. But Luciana asks, Lori, what do you think about remote viewing messages from our spiritual guides so we can communicate with them more directly?
Well, I agree with you in this, Jeffrey, in that the term remote viewing is used very broadly. And so people would like to ask, well, how could I use remote viewing to communicate with my guides? And in a way, there is a way to do that. But the way that we do it is in the intermediate level of remote viewing with the military method. We use 8 columns, and we're taught that the structure of remote viewing is kind of like a physical martial art. And by physically moving your body and saying things out loud and engaging yourself, you're allowing the subconscious to have more freedom. And so in Luciana's question, what she's really going for, I think, is understanding maybe a level she hasn't gotten to yet. I'm not sure at what level Luciana is at, but if you get to the intermediate level where there's 8 columns, and you touch the column that we call the SI column, or the sight impact column. Ingo called it the
You have
emotional.
a sheet of paper in front of you with 8 columns on it.
Right, 8 written columns that you've done by hand, and you've written these column headings out, and you have these 8 columns, and you're not making lines down the page for the columns, but you just know they're there. You have these 8 headings. One of the headings is sight impact, or SI, and we call it the SI column. And you touch that, and you're aiming at connecting with another consciousness. Whether that is, I'll give you an example. I was working on a kidnapping case, and the kidnapper was an organization, and they had kidnapped several people. I was just trying to help find one person. And I discovered that several people had been kidnapped, and they were being held underground in these cells in an underground facility. And I was able to connect with the guard that was guarding all these prisoners. Now, how did I connect with this guard? The guard gave me the name of the organization that had done the kidnapping, which proved to be accurate. The guard gave me the name of the closest town, closest to where they were holding these people in this facility. That proved to be accurate, and gave me the whole philosophy of the organization. Now, how could I do that sitting in my little study in Amarillo, Texas at the time? And we were doing everything in real time. And before we came into the live stream, it was funny because my husband, Jim, who's always so supportive, he was like, oh, be sure you tell Jeffrey about the kidnapping case and doing things in real time. And before the meeting started, when we were talking about time and space, the thing is that we were in the same time zone as the kidnappers. And it was nighttime. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and it was a full moon. And so as I was connecting in the SI column, so in other words, by maintaining my hand there and tapping this column, I'm using that as symbolically as like a portal to someone else's consciousness. So I was connecting with this kidnapper's guard and getting all this information on a subconscious level. So the guard wasn't aware that I was obtaining this information, but yet it was there. Now I know right away when I say that, people get scared and go, oh no, could you remote view me? And oh no, what if everybody's watching me? So if you have a tendency to paranoia, set that aside for right now, because people like me have lives and we have a lot better things to do than to remote view people like you. So don't be scared. I don't sit around trying to remote view people. This actually takes a great deal of work and a level of skill that it takes time you have to build up to this point. But this goes back to Luciana's question, because technically you could use that same technique to connect. It's because it's all a game in a way. It's all kind of like, it's like people like me who are always late. You know, when you're always late, you have to play mental games with yourself. Like I'll set the clock, 10 minutes ahead, or, different things to try to be on time. I set a million alarm clocks. We have to play these games with ourselves. Well, if you think of it as a game and you think, well, I'm going to write this SI on this piece of paper and I'm going to touch that and use that as a technique that's going to I'm going to pretend this is a portal that I'm going to be able to connect to whatever. And so Luciana could feasibly use that technique learned in remote viewing to connect with guides and get information from guides and things. But Luciana, I just want to tell you that in reality, it's unnecessary, because you can connect with your guides through prayer, through meditation, through lots of things, because the guides are around you all the time. Whereas this particular guard was off in a whole nother country. And so I was connecting because I didn't even know the guard existed. I stumbled upon the guard in the session. So if you were to connect with your guides just through prayer, through meditation, and if that felt cumbersome to you and you felt like it was easier to connect through this SI column, you could definitely do that. And if you haven't yet, and forgive me, Luciana, because I don't remember what level you're at, but if you haven't yet gotten to the intermediate level, you're going to dive into all that when you get into the intermediate course. And so that's a really exciting thing. Oh, but I just want to say one thing about the real time. Usually when we're remote viewing, we're not in real time. We're viewing something in the past or in the future. So let's say I want to view the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Well, I'm time traveling to that event, right? But when I'm viewing something in real time, it's actually really exciting, and it's something that remote viewers don't do very often. They're not often viewing in the present moment. So I was communicating with this guard in real time, and my monitor, who was my husband Jim, knew it. And so it was a full moon that night. And I said, I'm standing outside, because he said, can you speak to the guard and get information about where they are, because we're trying to find this kidnapped man, right? And so I said, well, I'm standing outside and he's pointing to this hillside, and in the darkness I can see that there's lights on this hillside. And so I asked the guard, what is the name of that village? And he told me the name of it. And then my smart husband, who's a genius, said, can you point to the full moon? And I went like this. So I was literally pointing one direction this way and this way, and he was able to triangulate and get a special map that showed, and we were able then to pull everything up on Google Maps that matched everything I had sketched. And it was just a phenomenal experience. The whole experience was really phenomenal, but it was one of the few times I remember viewing in real time where I'm not being asked to view something that happened in the past or something that's supposed to happen in the future.
Mm.
Well, one of the things I notice in this exposition, Lori, is on the one hand, Luciana is interested in connecting with her spirit guides. And on the other hand, you use this technique to presumably establish a kind of telepathic link with a living human being in a distant location in real time. So I guess it provokes me to want to ask you, what is your opinion about spirit guides? Do we all have them? Are they figments of our subconscious, or are they actually autonomous entities?
I believe my personal belief system, and I always encourage everyone because I'm always cautious about cult leaders, you know. So I always tell people, hey, this is my belief system. You stick to your belief system. Don't feel like you have to adopt mine in any way. But I do believe that we have guides and helpers for sure. I believe that the world that we live in, the reality that we inhabit, is full of things that are often unseen to us only because of the limitations of these human bodies. And that's why remote viewing is so exciting to me, because even my kids say, Mom, you've been into this since 1996. Like, doesn't it bore you by now? Like, aren't you tired of this? I'm like, oh my God, I'm so not tired. Because I feel like we're barely scratching the surface. You know, and one lifetime isn't enough to possibly explore all that there is to explore. But reality, I always come back to this question. My students hear me say this a lot, don't they, Luciana? That what is reality? You know, what is reality? And I think that there are multiple dimensions, and that in these dimensions, you know, there are probably people occupying this space right now if there really is no time. Like, we know that the land we inhabit, we find arrowheads and pottery all the time. We're in central New Mexico in the mountains, and we're right on the edge of the forest. So we find shards of pottery, and my granddaughter found this gorgeous obsidian arrowhead. So we know that this land was inhabited by Native Americans. And one day when we first moved here in 2017, in early 2017, I was taking my grandson for a walk, and I was with Jim and my stepdaughter and her husband, and we were all walking together towards the forest. And my grandson was over here, and Jim was right here, and my stepdaughter and her husband were over there, and we're walking along, and I'm talking, and then I go to say something to Jim, and there's no one there. And then I realized that Jim's actually on the other side of his daughter, and I was like, oh. And then my grandson said, oh, you saw him too? And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? He said, well, there's the Indian boy who lives here, you know. And he was 7 years old. My grandson was 7 years old. And so he has this friend that lives on the land, who's this Native American boy. And he was walking next to me, and I saw him, and just out in my peripheral vision, I was just assuming it was Jim. And then when I actually looked, you know, there was no one there. So we know, and we've had so much phenomena in our homes here, you know, just things moving and spontaneously. We had a chair lift up and set back down, and we had Jim's glasses slide across the table one night. Just so many physical phenomena also that occur. So we know for sure that the world that we see with our human limited vision is not all there is to see. And when you study near-death experiences and you talk to people who've had near-death experiences, almost universally, they explain that when if they're in a room with, like, say they're on the operating table and there's doctors in the room, when they step out of their bodies, when their human body has suddenly the heart has stopped and the breathing has stopped and all that, and they literally are above their bodies, they see guides helping. They literally, and that's almost universal in almost most of the near-death experiences that you hear. There's angels and guides and all kinds of activity happening that the people in the room are completely unaware of because we're so unlimited once we get out of these bodies.
Mhm, mhm.
This is such a fun conversation, isn't it? I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Definitely. I was just wondering, Lori, if you could, for those who maybe are new to remote viewing, and we are getting a lot of questions coming in, so Jeff and I will go back and forth asking you questions as we go, and anything you want to talk about, Lori, that's even maybe separate from the questions, by all means. This is, you're the guest. Can you share a little overview of what remote viewing is? And I know you described a few practical applications from a professional perspective or also as individuals, but can you share how those who want to use it professionally, how that might be beneficial for people who want to employ them, and how people who don't want to use it professionally might use remote viewing?
For sure. You know, when I set up the CRV Pro program in February of 2021, one of the reasons I did it was that I felt there's a big gap between people who go into any kind of study with concerning remote viewing, no matter what teacher they go to, whether it's Paul Smith or Lynn Buchanan or Dave Morehouse or Lori Williams or, any of the teachers out there. And forgive me if for the ones I've not mentioned, there's just a lot of them now. And you can go into any of those schools to study remote viewing, and then you can spend a goodly amount of money. And when people go, yeah, you spend a ton of money, I'm like, well, how much do golfers spend that want to really get into golf on the clubs and the clothes and all the things? I mean, anything you get into, whether it's piano clubs. My grandson, one of my grandnephew is into violin, and one bow can cost thousands of dollars, not to mention how much the violin costs. So anything you want to get into can be expensive. But after investing money in something, then the idea is it just a hobby? Do you just walk away after that and use it to entertain friends at parties? Or, what is the purpose? Is if you're really going to go all the way with it, what do you want to do with it? And I felt like there was a gap in that. A lot of people are just like, okay, what do I do now? So I thought if I created a program in which people could go in from the get-go and say, I'm going to go from ranked beginner to professional remote viewer in 3 years, then and then we have a curriculum and everything they're going to learn in those 3 years, and then we have a beautiful graduation ceremony. They get a gorgeous diploma. It's not a certificate, it's an actual diploma on parchment in a beautiful frame when they're done, and then we feature them on our website. But that third year we work with them to help them kind of hone in, what is it you really want to do with this? If their goal is I'll give you some examples of some of the goals. For example, if the goal is I want to be a professional remote viewer and work for other people, like for a remote viewing company, then that's one goal. If it's I want to open my own remote viewing project company, that's another goal. Somebody might say, well, I want to work for insurance companies and help uncover insurance fraud and help find missing art. And another person might say, I have actually two students who have companies now where they specialize in finding missing objects and missing pets. So that's a cool goal. And then what surprised me though is I assumed that everyone who would go into this program, this 3-year program, would want to do this professionally in some way. And I have another woman who's been studying with me since 2006, and she is a realtor, and she uses remote viewing to really hone in on the exact house that someone, when they approach her and say, I'm looking to buy a house, she can make sure they get in the house that is going to make them the happiest and all that sort of thing. And she can do that so quickly that it helps her increase her sales, because instead of having to show them 20 houses, they usually buy the first or second one. But then for those who say, well, I actually just want to use it to explore myself and to get to know myself better. I just really want to use it in my own life to remote view how my day's going to go and what should I do today, or how can I, whatever, should I go on that trip to Venezuela that I was planning to take, or what I mean? People can use it to really, like, when is the optimum time? You learn these skills that would be things like, when would be the optimum time for me to invest or for me to sell my stocks? When would be the optimum time for me to propose to my sweetheart, etc. So you can, there are so many ways to use these talents once you've really honed them. that it's just unlimited. And a lot of people don't want to use it in some professional fashion. They just want to use it to improve their own lives.
Yeah, it sounds like they're connecting with their intuition.
Exactly. But the great thing about CRV is if you've always felt like you're just, I'm about as psychic as a bag of rocks, as a good friend of mine used to say. She'd say, I'm about as psychic as a bag of rocks, but she could use CRV and was amazing. So I think that the cool thing about CRV is that it's a methodology, a step-by-step methodology that anyone, anywhere, anywhere in time or space can use to get information on demand. And that's so cool. I mean, it's like now we have the on-demand sports events, right? You want to watch the Super Bowl or whatever, it's on demand. What if you could just on demand get the answer to that question that or that decision you've been trying to make? On demand. How would that improve your finances, your career, your relationships? So that's my passion. That's why I love CRV.
Definitely. You said a very interesting piece I just want to comment on before we move on is that you said people use it to remote view how their day is going to go. And I'm wondering if you can just comment on the component of sort of how much free will a person has then, because if they're remote viewing how their day is going to go, what is the difference of that versus that they have their own volition to create how their day will go?
Well, I don't see them as being opposed in any way, those two ideas.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. There is a student, he was actually a student of Lynn's, not mine, but this guy was so creative, and he drove an ambulance. So he worked on an ambulance team. And so they would get calls and they would go to emergencies, accidents or whatever. But they had a system where the first half of the day, one guy would be driving and the other guy would be doing triage. And then they would switch in the afternoon, and whoever was driving would then be doing triage. So he would get up in the morning and he would take kind of a glossy overlook of his day and see when will be the heaviest workload of the day. And then he would volunteer to be the driver during that part of the day. And after a month or so of this, his teammates were going, "How come you're always driving when the workload's the heaviest? How does that work?"
They noticed.
Yeah, we noticed that you're always driving when things get really hot and heavy. And so, I just thought that was pretty hilarious, but I also thought it was pretty ingenious. So when I say how your day's going to go, I'm not talking about specific things like, oh, well, at 1 o'clock there's going to be an accident. At 3 o'clock, I'm going to go. I'm going to be in Starbucks. It's more like kind of looking at the general way that the day is going to go. So to give you an example, when I was, Jim and I were going to go on a trip and teach CRV all the way up the East Coast and then end up in California and Los Angeles. So we had this whole trip planned. It was a 4-month trip on the road with this bus that we had at the time. We weren't living in the bus, but we had it to travel with. And so beforehand, I sat down and I did a quick session just to kind of get a feeling for each of the classes that we had set up. So we had, I think, 2 classes set up in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We had a class set up in Athens, Ohio. We had a class set up in Massachusetts that I don't remember the name of the city. But I looked at each one of those and I knew exactly kind of the feeling that each class had, whether it was going to be like a breeze and really euphoric, or whether there was going to be a little bit of tough. And then one class in Massachusetts, we actually taught 3, like basic, intermediate, advanced in Massachusetts. And I could tell that in the basic class, I immediately viewed that there would be one student that I didn't know, a new student that I would be meeting for the first time, who would be exceedingly difficult to handle in the class. And sure enough, there was, but the thing about it is to be forewarned is to be forearmed, right? So because I knew that, I went in prepared for that and was able to handle it so much better than if it had just hit me unawares. So that I found to be so helpful is when you can kind of look at, ahead at your day and say, oh, the afternoon's going to be kind of tough. So I want to be sure to spend extra time this morning in meditation, or I want to spend extra time kind of bulking up on my on my uplifting things, and keep reminding, what will I need to remind myself of today to help me get through this day? Like, I've been really leaning heavily on Pema Chodron's saying, whatever is happening is your path to enlightenment. So that when something bad happens, you're like, okay, whatever's happening is the path to enlightenment. So,
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah.
so did I answer your question? I kind of was going around the block a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit though about what you asked, in that when I'm teaching associative remote viewing, which I'm going to be doing in February this month, people always ask for associative remote viewing because it's considered to be the type of remote viewing that lets people win the lottery or do better at the racetrack or whatever. And so people get excited about it and they really want me to teach it. And I believe this year is the year, we have it all edited and everything, but this year we'll be coming out with our video version of the ARV course. But when people ask about associative remote viewing, and the thing everybody really wants is they want to win the big lotto, the $1 billion lottery. And how can we win the lotto? How can we win the lotto? And it's kind of fun because I do teach about how to start winning the lotto. Most people don't want to put the work in to win the full big lotto because you have to put a lot of work in. But I always bring up the question of predestination versus free will when we talk about the idea of winning the big lotto. Because when you think about winning $1 billion, like Jeffrey, you won $500,000 in that, you got that prize from Bigelow. Was that a life-changing prize, would you say?
Yes, I would say it was a life-changing prize, but it didn't change my lifestyle. It wasn't the money that changed my life. It was the fact of winning.
Okay, so let's say though that let's say someone were to win $1 billion, $1 billion. If somebody were to win $1 billion, that is life-changing, right? Excuse me, not just for the person who wins, but for the ripple effect that it might have, because $1 billion is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you were to take $1 billion, what could you do with $1 billion? So you could start a company that cleans the oceans, or you could start a company that, and then invest that money and multiply it and do something really major that affects a ton of lives, right? Or you could squander it all and end up poverty stricken, a few years later. I don't know if you could squander $1 billion that quickly, but I've never had $1 billion, so I don't know. but that when we talk about it in class, I say, well, if you think there is such a thing as destiny, do you believe in destiny? Do you believe that, for example, Gandhi was destined to be Gandhi? Or Jesus was destined to be Jesus, or, how much do you believe in destiny? And if you believe in destiny, then is someone specifically destined to win that $1 billion because of what the universe knows they will do with it and the lives that are intended to be affected by that? Because, okay, if we're back to belief systems, I have a strong belief that we come into this life, into this reality, because we choose to come here for our own spiritual growth. So we choose our parents, we choose and I don't have any proof of this. This is just what I personally believe, but I believe we do choose our parents, or we do choose the people that we're interacting with in our lives. And even when something happens and there's a conflict or a difficult relationship, I'm like, okay. So, and I actually look at, for example, at my former marriage that way. I'm like, oh, we chose to come in together. We were each other's teachers. We chose to come in and we taught each other these lessons, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and it actually helps you a lot to avoid bitterness and things, like, oh, they did this to me or they did that to me. Instead, you're kind of like, oh, they were my teachers, and this was all part of my learning experience that I chose to have. It really helps to avoid that sense of betrayal or hurt or bitterness. And again, Pema Chodron's, whatever's happening is the path to enlightenment. But so that's my personal belief system. I do believe that destiny has a role in things. And so Lynn told me a story years ago, and of course, memory is imperfect. So I'm going to share it the way I remember it. It might not be exactly the way he told it to me, but in my memory, what he told me was that at the time he was still working in the unit. He had quite a commute between Maryland and Fort Meade. and he lived in Mechanicsville, Maryland, and he was commuting to Fort Meade. And he decided he was going to put in all the effort to win the big lotto. And he did all the steps, which takes a bit of time if you're working alone. He did all the steps over everything else, and he got all six numbers accurately. It's actually 12 numbers, I think, but he got all six two-digit numbers accurately. But he had purchased the wrong ticket because Maryland and DC are together. And so he bought, I don't remember if he bought the DC ticket and those numbers matched the Maryland ticket or vice versa. But that made me think, okay, so he did everything right. He got the right numbers, but the universe still didn't let him win because maybe he just wasn't destined to win that money. And would that money have taken him off the path that he then went on? Had he won, $500 million or something, whatever it was, the big lotto that he was going for, what path would he have taken that perhaps would have deviated him from all the lives, including mine, that he was destined to affect? So that's kind of, I think about those things all the time, and I don't think any of us has a perfect response for that, for those, the perfect answer, but that's at least kind of how I ponder it. So I always let people know when they're coming to take ARV, you can't come take this class thinking you're going to walk away and go win the big lottery and win $1 billion, because it might not be your part of your destiny. That just might not be the plan that you chose when you came in.
Yeah.
I remember talking to my friend Gary Zukav, the author of The Seat of the Soul, shortly after ARV was popularized, and Russell Targ did his silver future forecasting experiment with great success, and I was very excited about it. And there was a big fund manager in Boston who said, yes, he uses the Gary Zukav's book, The Dancing Woolly Masters, when making major financial decisions. So I thought, I'll ask Gary what he thinks about ARV, using it to make money in the futures forecasting. And he was very clear. He said, when you use psychic abilities for personal gain, he said, the result that you get is going to be dependent 100% upon your karma.
I think that is, it's really interesting. Mel Riley, who was the first remote viewer in the unit, and Mel had been raised. He was white-haired, blue-eyed white guy with Irish background and absolutely not a drop of Indian blood. But he was pretty much raised and really heavily influenced by the Ho-Chunk Indians in Wisconsin, where he grew up. And so he considered himself, and they considered him, a member of the tribe, even though he didn't have Indian blood. But he was deeply spiritual, and yet he wasn't traditionally spiritual or traditionally religious, if we could put it that way. But one thing he said to me, he said, he was the only soldier, the only member of the military that was in the remote viewing unit for 2 tours of duty. So he was in for 4 years. Then he went on another tour of somewhere else for reconnaissance for 4 years. And then he was back in the military for 4 years. So he got to see a broad spectrum of the progress in that unit, from Close Your Eyes and Tell Me What You See with Russell Targ to the full military CRV method with Ingo Swann. And one thing that Mel said was that he said, I watched a lot of people come and go in those 8 years. And he said, and I noticed that the people who came in with thinking, ooh, I could make money with this, he said they never were able to get deep enough into the process to actually do anything with it. And he said the people who really became the world-class remote viewers and went on with it were people who really had a level of spirituality in their lives. And he said, and I saw a lot of atheists go into the unit, but nobody came out an atheist, which I thought was another interesting statement. I was like, oh. So.
We have a question here from a viewer whose YouTube name, and maybe real name, is Crystal A. And Crystal says, hi, Lori, do dreams complement your work in remote viewing?
Definitely. Absolutely. Now, they don't complement my remote viewing sessions as such. Well, I have to say that one time I had a dream that I was doing a remote viewing session.
Hmm.
In my dream, I kept having to we set aside nouns in the remote viewing process. And Emmy asked me earlier, and I in my ADHD way, I didn't answer this one question. She said, "What is remote viewing?" And for those who might not know, I would assume most of the people attending this know, but CRV, controlled remote viewing, is a written methodology where you're sitting at a table with a piece of paper and a pen, and you're writing things on the paper in a certain method, using a certain methodology where certain things, certain parts of speech go on one side, and we set aside nouns. And our mantra is describe, don't identify. And when you think of descriptors, you think of adjectives more than anything. So we're setting adjectives on the left side of the page and nouns on the right side of the page. And we're constantly moving down the paper, kind of zigzagging our way down. And we also use symbols that we call ideograms, and we let those symbols represent certain things. So it's this whole methodology to get information from anywhere in time or space. Okay, so what were we talking about before that? You asked something.
Dreams.
Dreams. Okay, thank you. So dreams. So I had this dream that that I was setting aside this name, and I kept setting aside the name in the dream, but it kept coming back and coming back. Well, the next day, my then husband comes up to me and says, "Hey, would you like to do a remote viewing session?" And so he gives me a target number, which we call a coordinate, and I did the session, and then boom, the dream popped in, that word that I kept setting aside, so I had to set the word aside because it popped in because of my dream. And so I did this whole session, and when I was done, to make a very long story short, what it turned out the target was actually a kidnapped child. It was a real target. It wasn't a practice one, but I thought I was doing a practice target. But the information, I ended up working with the police and everything because the information I got and the name of the town that I kept setting aside was within a really close radius of the town where this child had been kidnapped. And it was the only town of that name in a 5-state radius. And so my then husband was a long haul truck driver, and he had a big trucker's atlas, and he did all this research without telling me. This was before I knew anything. And he said, I searched and searched. There is no town of that name in a 5-state radius. So the fact that you name that town and it's right there near where she was kidnapped, that was just one thing in the session that I got that really resonated with the police, because I described the area where she had been living before she was kidnapped, and a big military chemical storage tank that was in the backyard, et cetera, et cetera. They did eventually find her, and unfortunately she had been killed, but I was a brand new remote viewer when all this happened. I'd been remote viewing like 2 months. I mean, it was like just getting started. And so this was a, pretty scary situation for me at the time. And we learned a good lesson, don't be messing with that kind of stuff when you're just getting started. It's not time for you to mess with that yet. Learn to walk before you try to run. But anyway, back to the dream question. Dreams have always played a huge role in my life because I've had precognitive dreams that have come true to the nth detail my entire life, as far back as I can remember. So when I have a dream, I take it seriously, but I can sense the difference between a nonsense dream where you're just processing stuff versus a dream that is truly precognitive. And they have a different feel to them. So when I have a precognitive dream, I'm like, oh, I just had a dream. The other day I said to Jim, I had a really disturbing dream last night. He said, I hate disturbing dreams, especially when you have them. So anyway, but so they play a role, but they don't really influence my CRV sessions that often. But they play a role in my life.
Do you have intentions of having a particular dream around a particular topic, or to get information through dreams? Do you ever use them that way, or do you more just allow them to speak to you as they will?
I do. So many times lately when I'm going to bed, I always stand by the bed and I say a prayer before I go to bed, just to kind of collect my thoughts and my concerns about the world or my children. So I just talk to the universe, and I always thank the universe for the day that I've just had, regardless of how the day's gone. And any battles that I've been facing, or trials or tribulations, I always thank the universe for those as well, because I know they're teaching me. Excuse me. And so when what I usually do is I say, please speak to us in our dreams, because Jim and I are praying together usually. So I'll say, please speak to us in our dreams, or, share anything you want. And I'm talking to the universe and I'm like, put your will in our hearts. That's something I always ask for, so that we're being guided on the whatever whatever we're here to do, that we're staying guided for that.
That's beautiful. I just want to also highlight something that you said. And of course, we have a lot of questions coming in. So there's one I want to ask you from a viewer in just a moment. You mentioned that when you were helping to find somebody and that you were remote viewing this guard, that it was a full moon. And that my understanding of astrology is that a full moon can illuminate what's hidden according to the sign and the degree and so forth. And so when you were talking about predestiny versus free will, that astrology can also indicate perhaps a person's karmic path as well. And that I don't know if you've done any work with astrology or have trained any astrologers who've correlated, because I know in my life, I notice how it's almost like a clock with astrology, and you have to study a lot to understand it, but it's almost like certain events or impulses might, we are impacted perhaps by certain planetary or what we perceive as planetary aspects. I'm just curious if you have any experience with that or thoughts about that.
I have been around people who are fascinated with astrology my entire life. I personally have never delved into it. I know that I'm a Cancer. And as Jim Gaffigan says, "Oh no, I killed Grandma." But he's the comedian Jim Gaffigan, if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, but because he's a Cancer also. But recently, just about a year ago, a man moved to Mountain Air where I live, and he's an older guy, and he's been a Vedic astrologer for many, many years. And he said, "I want to do a full Vedic astrology reading for you." So I've had several students also who were professional astrologers who did readings for me, or did my whole chart and all this. And it's interesting too, because one of them told me, "Your chart is so strange because your whole life is in the public. You almost have no private life whatsoever." But yeah, so this Vedic astrologer gave me kind of a here's some things you're going to be seeing in the next couple of years. And a lot of the stuff that he indicated, and he didn't talk specifics, but he just would say something like, "Well, September's going to be tough because there's da 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 da," and there's this conjoining of Mars and Pluto, and and he would say things that to me he could have been speaking Greek, as far as my knowledge goes. But then in September, indeed, we did have some really, outstanding things happen that I was like, "Oh, he kind of warned me
Mhm.
about those." And so it's interesting. To me, it's fascinating, and because I am always saying, what is reality anyway? I'm really interested in how that plays out, and how how does that what does that have to do with everything? And if you want to just kind of buckshot, buckshot just goes everywhere, right? If you want a buckshot and you say, okay, we've got ghosts, interdimensional beings, Sasquatch, UFOs, and ETs from other planets, and when you just kind of look out there and listen to what everybody's into, and we've got astrology, and we've got all kinds of mysteries, and we've got Antarctica, and you look at everything and you say, how does all this massive stuff fit together in this reality? Like, it's hard to fathom because it's so much.
Oh my gosh, that could be a great like task for your remote viewers. So here's a question from a viewer, Susan F, who asks, how important is structure and protocol when remote viewing? And they say, I see so many variations out there.
You know what the way I feel, Susan, is that, like you said, there's so many variations. I went to speak at the Omega Institute a few years back, as I was a presenter at the IRVA conference at the Omega Institute. And Tom McNear, who was the first student that was ever taught by Ingo Swann, and Ingo is considered the father of CRV, controlled remote viewing, because he came up with the structure of CRV. And so Tom was his first student, and I was excited to meet Tom because I knew he had been, Lynn had spoken very highly of Tommy. Lynn would say, "Oh, Tommy is a great guy." So I see Tom McNear over there, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to get to meet Tom McNear." And then I walked over and he said, "Oh, I've been looking forward to meeting you." And I was so shocked because I was all excited to meet him and he was all excited to meet me. And we ended up having this wonderful conversation. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to Tom about was the controversy between these different techniques that are out there. So Susan F. said, there's so many different techniques and how important is structure. And so Tom and I talked about that very question because there were people who do what I call worshiping at the Church of Ingo, and who will really come down on you if they feel like you're not doing something exactly the way Ingo said to do it. And so I said, Tom, what do you think of this? Because you studied with Ingo, you were his favorite student. He made it very clear that you were always his favorite student, and you were his first student. And he said, Lori, I feel like if something works, that's all that matters, like it's kind of like that Bible verse that says, "Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them." I mean, if it bears good fruit, then why does it have to be exactly a certain way? So at saying that at the same time, I had one student call me as the structure Nazi. And so, he's a really good friend of mine, guys. This person didn't mean it in any way. But I was teaching him advanced class and he looked at me, he goes, "You're the structure Nazi." But, my teacher taught me that structure was really, really important. And there was an old saying that I have since learned is not exactly accurate, but that Ingo had a paper over his desk that said, "Sight be damned, structure is everything." And then Tom explained, actually, Ingo didn't have that sign over his desk, but that it was actually another one of Ingo's students who suddenly came upon the realization that if he just stayed in structure, his sessions were more accurate. And I have seen what, Susan, I have to tell you, I had two different students, not connected, who became amazing controlled remote viewers. Their structure was beautiful and they were super accurate. And both of them, after a while, started leaving the structure behind, thinking they could take some shortcuts, and their accuracy levels plummeted. They just totally plummeted. So I am a big believer in structure. I've been doing this now. I started studying in 1996, so however many years that is now. We're in 2025, so we're heading up to 30 years now on this. And I get information through a lot of different techniques. And as Jeffrey mentioned, I've even done trance mediumship and different types of mediumship and had phenomenal results. I've used dreams, phenomenal results. I've done channeling and used hypnosis to get psychic information, phenomenal results. But when I have an assignment for an operational remote viewing thing, I stay in structure. I use structure. And I always go back to the structure and because the structure to me is the one thing that kind of overcomes emotional impacts. So you've got to give you an example, Lynn Buchanan was in the middle of a really important project with the military, and he got a phone call that his father was dying, and his mother was like, "Get home quick, try to get here before he dies." Lynn jumps up to just run out as you would do as a reaction. He's just like, "Oh my God, I gotta go." And his superior officer said, "Hey buddy, you're a soldier, sit down and finish your session." Now, how do you do that? How can you psychically, any psychic, natural psychic at that point would be like, "I can't do this right now. I can't get psychic information. My father's dying. How do you expect me to do that?" Right? But Lynn was a soldier and he was taught CRV, and he was also taught the set aside method, which you can learn on my website and my blogs. And so he sat down, he set aside the fact that his father was dying, and he finished his session because the structure allows you to do that. And so that's one of my big pitches for the structure.
That's a wonderful story. Here's a viewer whose YouTube name is Maitreya, who says, "I can remote view, but I want to be as good as," and he names a person we both know who is a professional remote viewer. And I want to be able to be like a full-time professional remote viewer. How much am I going to have to pay? And how long will the training take?
Okay, well, first of all, how much you're going to pay will depend on who you study with. Your goals, your specific goals, also will determine who you study with and how much you're going to pay. But how long it takes is completely up to you because it depends on so many factors. So let's say I say, okay, I'm going to join Lori Williams' 3-year program, and in 3 years, I'm going to be a professional remote viewer and I'm going to do XYZ. But let's say in the midst of the 3 years, something major happens. You get in a car accident, or you get transferred in a job that's going to take up a lot more of your time and you don't have as much time to practice or whatever. All of life events and a person's individual motivation and discipline will affect the time that anything takes. So I can't answer that question because it's really depends on the individual and the choices that you make as to which trainer you train with, how much time you put in, and all these other things. I will say though that our school, the school that I have developed since I started I actually created my business in 1999. So how many years is that? Math is 26 years or
26.
something.
Mhm.
Intuitive specialists.
Yes, now I named it Intuitive Specialists, I think in 2004 when I actually formed an LLC. And then this year we have switched from being an LLC to being an S Corp. But in 1999, I just opened my business and started actually having a business with this. And and my goal all along was to have the most comprehensive training anyone could provide. And I based everything on my own struggles when I was learning. Because I was learning from Lynn, and Lynn had a lot going on, and he had tons of people trying, and he was just a one-man show. He didn't have help. And so sometimes, trying to get a hold of him or getting answers to questions could be a frustrating experience. And other times when I knew I couldn't bother him and I needed support, I felt really alone on the journey, right? So I based a lot of what I have in my school on my own experience, thinking to become a really good remote viewer, you really need support along the journey. And so I thought, how can I make it possible? And also as a teacher who comes from a line of teachers generationally, I understand that we have kinesthetic learners who only learn by doing. Then you have auditory learners who learn by hearing, and you have visual learners who learn by seeing. So I was like, how can I make sure that my training reaches every single type of learner? That was another goal that I had, right? So I wanted to make sure it reaches every type of learner. And then you have people who are super intellectual, and then you have other people who learn in a more simple way. And they say if you're going to give a presentation, you should have everything at an 8-year-old level where a third grader could understand what you're saying. So when I wrote Boundless and Monitoring, I tried to write them in a way that if you were a third grader, you could read it and understand it. Because I thought, great, we have those intellects out there who can understand really deep concepts, but what if you present deep concepts and techniques in a way that even the people at the third grade level could understand it? So that's always been my goal, is to have a broad reach and be able to access everybody through books, through videos, through live trainings, because there's those who say, I just can't learn from a book, or I just can't learn from a video course. I have to go to a live training. So I tried to provide it all: books, video courses, live training, a club that provides mentoring on an ongoing basis, because I actually overheard one well-known trainer say, once a student leaves my classroom, why would I want to have anything to do with them? And I was just like, oh my God, that's not my philosophy. But so I really want to make sure that people get follow-up, so we even offer 2 to 4 months of free training, depending on whatever promotion we've got going, 2 to 4 months of free mentoring when somebody purchases a course, so that they get ongoing support in a club with like-minded people. And then we also have an online forum where people can talk to each other and find partners and get answers to questions in a lively, non-Facebook based forum. And then ultimately, then we have the 3-year professional training program. So I don't know of any other school that has that broad and that much offering for someone who wants to learn CRV. But for some people, that's like killing a gnat with a hammer, because all they want to do is kind of just stick their toe in and check it out, and they don't necessarily want to, go all the way. So that's true too.
Let me ask the question a different way, Lori. How long did it take you, and how much money did you spend, obviously several decades ago, before you felt that you had reached the level of professional competency in remote viewing?
That's a great question. So I hate for people to base anything on me because I feel like I was dumb as a stick. I was, truthfully, I know you're going to say, no, you weren't. No, you weren't. But I, I went from feeling like I was pretty smart to when I would get into classes with Lynn, he had brilliant students that would come in and I'd think, I'm just not getting this. When he would present things about retrocausality, I would come from a missionary background and where time was very linear and the concepts of time, there was nothing out. I just was coming from such a zero point that it took me a lot longer, I think, than nowadays. We're seeing people really getting to advanced levels so much quicker. So to answer my, what was the name of the person? The person.
Maitreya.
Maitreya, I really feel like one thing we're seeing through morphic resonance, if you study Rupert Sheldrake and what's the other guy's name? It escapes me. Anyway, the British man who is in his 80s now, who ideograms and retrocausality came a lot. He wrote a lot about that. But anyway, you'll find that these concepts mean with morphic resonance that the more people that are learning a thing, the easier it becomes to learn. And so we are seeing people progressing so much faster than we progressed. Lynn and I, even, both of us. So don't base anything on me. As far as how much you would spend, it depends on how far you want to go. You can go on my website and see how much my courses cost. I think my basic 3-day workshop is $1,497 if you take the 3-day, and you can retake that course. If you're in my club, you can retake it as often as you like, as long as it's, as long as I'm teaching. If you're not in my club, you can take it repeatedly for 2 years. And I usually teach it 3 to 4 times a year. Retaking it, believe it or not, every time you retake a 3-day live workshop, you just hear stuff you never heard before. So many of my students have taken them multiple times. So all my 3-day workshops have that benefit. And one of my students said, so every time you take it, you're having your expense. If you spend $14.97 and you take it twice, and cut $14.97 in half. If you take it 4 times, cut that into quarters, because that's how much it's costing you per course. Now, if you wanted to go on to intermediate and advanced and post-advanced, I have like 8 courses or 7 or 8 courses out there. Then you'll end up spending, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 probably, spaced out over a period of years, if you were taking all those courses. And so, and that's what most viewers, I think, who go all the way, that's probably a pretty reasonable idea of what they invest. And then there's other people who take, just one course and then they take it on from there. And so they're only going to spend, $1,500 and then go on. So it's totally, what do you want? What are you going for? One of my students said, this is the Harvard of remote viewing. So, it costs more to go to Harvard than it does to go to your local community college, and so that's another factor as well. And we do offer partial scholarships under certain circumstances, and people can apply for those, and we have certain scholarships that we pass out every year. So that's another issue as well. But so all I can speak from is from my school and my point of view. So you could ask other teachers as well.
Well, I know for some people, I'll just speak for myself for a moment. I decided I'm going to get a doctoral degree in parapsychology, something nobody else had done. It literally took 7 years. And during those 7 years, it basically took all my time and all my money.
That's the thing, when you really want something, and they say, something that's worth something costs something, something that if it doesn't cost anything, it's not worth anything. When I first started out, I wanted to teach for free. And so people always say, this is a gift of God and you shouldn't be charging for it. Hell no. I worked my butt off. It's like the old farmer who brings the pastor to look at his farm, and the farm says, the pastor said, oh my gosh, this is so gorgeous. Look at those fields up there of corn over there and fields of wheat over here. And da 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 da. He said, and the pastor says, I did all this. The farmer says, I did all this. I planted these things and I did this and I did this. And the pastor says, but remember, it's God's land. And he said, yeah, but you should have seen it when God had it. And so that's the thing, is that, yeah, God gives us a gift, but for us to hone that gift to the point where we can teach it. And whenever somebody says, oh, you shouldn't, you're just a shark, you shouldn't be charging for it, I'm like, Do you not have to have a job to pay your light bill? I mean, in your, to pay your rent? Of course you do. Do you expect to do that job for free? No, you don't. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if I didn't charge for it. I'd have to be at a regular job like everybody else, and I wouldn't be here. So I think that it's totally fair. Even the Bible says the labor is worthy of his hire, right? And muzzle not the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. So in other words, we're all, our labor is an energy exchange. And when I wanted to give everything away for free, Lynn also wanted to give everything away for free. We had that in common. And his wife, who was the business manager for their company, and I was working for the company, she was like, you and Lynn would give all this away for free. And you don't even have a business. You just have an ever increasing circle of friends. You guys have to charge. And then we started seeing that the people that we did anyway, we gave it to them for free anyway, because we were defying her and doing it. They never did anything with it. They never appreciated it. They didn't even, they would take a class and never pick up the book again. And we saw that over and over and over again when we did it for free. So we learned very quickly that what has no value has no value. What doesn't cost anything has absolutely no value. So yeah, that's true. When you really want something, you fight for it, and you're willing to spend all your time and all your money to get there. And then once you get there, then you can go look around and say, okay, now I'm here. What can I do with this? Look what you've done with it. You've done amazing things, Jeffrey.
Well, and we give away free videos every day.
That's true too. I have more free stuff on my website than any other teacher out there, than any other school. I have free courses, and I have a lot of free stuff. I give a ton of free stuff away.
Well, we do also have a sponsor now. So, I mean, we realize that we do have equipment. It is our time as well, our life force. And so, I appreciate what you're saying, Lori. Myself being a practitioner, I've experienced giving away sessions for free, and then people literally aren't as invested usually. And so there's a lot of value in what you have to offer, is what I'm hearing you say, and that it has very practical applications for people's lives practically, personally, but also for professional opportunities where they can then in turn go and earn money as well, which we all need in our current system.
For sure. Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So,
That's my favorite use of ARV too, is decision making more than money making.
yeah. Can you share a little bit about how RV helps with decision making?
Well, the key idea, if you keep this idea in mind, is that the body is the link between the conscious and subconscious minds. Therefore, that's why when we say this person's a pain in the neck, or, things like that, it's related, or God, this is giving me a headache. Those kinds of sayings come from the fact that our bodies are manifesting what's going on in our subconscious. And so how many of you have ever been disconnected from your own emotions, and then you suddenly realize that you're not feeling well, but then you realize I was feeling okay until I got this news, or I had this interaction with this person or whatever, and then you realize it's affecting you physically. And so the body is the link that connects the conscious and subconscious minds. So when you think about the body, everything works through the body. Everything works through the body. And what was the last thing you just said to me, Emmy?
About decision making, about how you use RV for decision making, because I think that that's a real. I work as an intuitive myself, and I think that that's I think the most practical way I think we can use these abilities personally. That's my view anyway, is that we can.
It is. It is. I use psychic ability throughout the day constantly, and I'm blessed to be married to a man who really respects that ability, and so it has saved our lives on a number of occasions. But anyway, so using the body, that's how we get answers. Like, let's say you want a simple yes or no answer. A lot of people in the audience have probably used a pendulum before just to get a yes or no answer. Well,
or want to and don't know how to use it reliably.
Yes, I have a free class on my website that teaches you how to do it. And so it's called Secrets of the Ancients. If you go on the website at intuitivespecialist.com, there's a free class called Secrets of the Ancients that you can get, and it teaches you how to use a pendulum. But how does that work though? Like, what is the science behind a pendulum giving you an answer? Well, the pendulum itself is an inert object, right? It doesn't have life. And the way that it works is the subconscious mind is connected to all the answers, and the subconscious is giving the answer through the body, so the subconscious works through the body, and it actually causes a minute vibration into the pendulum to give you the answer. So you first decide, for example, for me, I always say that that going from towards my chest and away from my chest is yes, and going shoulder to shoulder, if the pendulum's swinging this way, is no.
Mhm.
Now, some people program their pendulums every time they get a new pendulum, they say, show me yes, show me no.
Mhm.
I don't do that. I just mentally have it in my mind that, okay, if the pendulum moves like this, it's yes. If it goes like this, it's no. And then I can get a yes or no answer by asking the question. The problem comes if I'm really heavily invested in the answer and I want it to be a yes really bad, then that could be a problem. So what we do with ARV is we also blind ourselves to the answers. So you could put a yes response in an envelope, a no response in an envelope, and a none of the above response in a third envelope, not mark the envelopes, just mix them all up, and then say which one of these envelopes, like the envelope that has the answer I need is going to feel warmer than the others, for example. And this is a great technique for picking out gifts. I've used it for like picking out gifts all the time. Like the watch that my son will like the best, for Christmas is going to feel warmer than the others. And there's 8 watches that they've laid out on, on the thing, and you can say, okay, it's going to feel warmer than the other. It's amazing how it works. And again, we're kind of gaming the answer there.
Yeah, yeah, those are great examples, and even asking questions around where might be a good place to go on vacation, or how I have these 3 options of things to do on my Saturday, and kind of feeling into, if you will, the energy or what might give you the best experience.
You
Or
can apply that to dating. You could apply it to which job should I take? Like I've gotten offers from these 3 companies, or I'm dating these 3 different people. Which one would make the best spouse? I mean, you can use it for all kinds of things.
yeah, definitely. I just want to let everybody know, our viewers and listeners, that we have about 20 minutes left, and we're getting in a lot of great questions. Jeff, is there one that you see? Lori, you're doing a
Well,
great job, by the way, and thank you for all that you're sharing. Do you have any you want to ask, Jeff?
here's a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Biofuel Brad, who he's referring back to your story earlier, I think, about people who have been kidnapped. And he says, if you are looking for kidnapped children and you are entering the mind of the kidnapper and perhaps the twisted perspective of their reality, then don't those feelings and thoughts negatively affect you?
That is a great, great question, Brad. I don't know who Biofuel Brad is, or Brad is, but Brad, that I'm assuming your name is Brad, and I think that is a really good question. And in that, one of the things that my company and Lynn's company hold in very high regard is the safety of the viewer. There is no target worth losing a viewer over. So in my school, one thing we do is we make sure that any targets that we have that are practice targets, because we want to start people on practice targets. We want to build them up over time. So we want them doing innocuous targets that are completely benign, like a lake with some trees, that kind of thing. We're going to build them up over time so that by the time they reach the post-advanced levels and are ready to get into professional viewing, we've slowly and gradually built them up and taught them how to handle more intense targets. Because if you find a dismembered baby, that is going to definitely have an effect on you. If you get into the mind of a serial killer or a pedophile, that's definitely going to have an effect on you. But if you've been well trained and you've built up and you've been trained all that time, so that by the time you get to that point, those things either don't have an effect on you and you're able to observe them like a reporter would observe it. Like, how many violent movies have you seen, Brad? How many movies have you seen with blood and gore and people getting murdered, where they've really gotten into the head of the serial killer, and you've watched that movie? Did that movie leave you permanently affected? No. Why? Because you knew it was a movie, right? So one of the trainings that we do is to get people to the point where they can observe all this like a movie, and then do a complete detoxing afterwards. Now, there are some teachers out there who believe detoxing is unnecessary, and they're perfectly fine, and they've done a lot of really heavy duty targets throughout their lives. And they say, oh, I was always taught you didn't have to detox. Lynn and I both feel that detoxing is a really important part of our training. And so we do that from basic class on. We teach detoxing. And so I think it also depends on the type of viewer, because there are viewers who are tougher than others. There's some people who are more sensitive and some who are less sensitive. So that would also play a role in that answer.
Yeah. So here's a grouping of questions from about 3 different people. They have a similar theme, at least from my perspective. And one is from Welcome to the Show, and they ask, can remote viewing be reversed and targets hidden by other entities? And then I think they sign their name Adam Cook. Another question is, have you experienced intrusions by non-human intelligences or cosmic forces into the RV experience? And then Logan Clark asks, how can we help fight the dark forces? So they're asking about entities and dark forces and just curious if that impacts your work.
Those are, yes, and even though they're all kind of circling around negative things or dark things, they are 3 different questions. And the second question, the answer is yes to the second question. But which was, have you ever had like other non-human consciousnesses impede into a session? Several times we have. And I say we because I consider Jim and I a team, and I'm usually the viewer, he's usually the monitor. And we have had interdimensional beings, like, we interrupt this program to bring you an important message, and to kind of to jump in and say, hey, by the way, since you're viewing this, we wanted to mention, our concern for the planet or whatever. We've had some people kind of burst in, but they were all really high level, high frequency, good energies. It wasn't like dark forces. Now, I would like to share my perspective on the whole dark idea and dark forces. If you allow yourself to really get into, you can allow yourself to slide down a dark hole that you can't get out of. It's a slippery slope, and it can lead to complete and total demoralization and depression at anything you look at that's negative. You could look at the current state of the planet and get really depressed. You could look at current state of politics worldwide and get really depressed. And you could get into conspiracy theories and get really depressed and angry. I see so much anger coming from people's thought processes that go down those holes. So my personal technique, because people are like, how do you be a remote viewer for 30 years and work with all these different things and not pick up the mind of the serial killer, like the previous question we just had, and the answer is that I think it's really important to stay extremely positive. And Jeffrey knows that I just recently had a family tragedy a few days ago, and I'm sitting here and I think I'm reasonably sane so far. But one of the things is that because you have to kind of be able to segment. Okay, we've got pollution over here, we've got planetary crisis over here, we've got crazy politics over here, and you've got to be able to segment those things and separate them from your own personal present moment reality. So in this present moment, I'm sitting in this beautiful room, in this beautiful house, with a loving husband and a really cute puppy that I sometimes want to kill, but and I mean, so there's a lot of good, and I have running water and hot water and delicious food to eat. So if I look at my present moment reality, I can segment all these other things that in this moment don't have to touch me. Okay, they do not have to touch me in this moment. So I'm not going to sit here and think about dark entities, and the possibility that dark entities could affect me, because I'm now 67 and a half years old. And and so far so good with the dark entities. Why? Because I just don't allow that thinking to come into my reality. I'm not going to sit here and make myself a victim to dark entities and say, I'm a helpless, hapless person who's subject to dark entities. No, I'm going to I'm going to say I am a strong, independent, vibrant energy myself. And I know I'm Wonder Woman. Jim is a mixture of Merlin and Gandhi. I'm going to be Wonder Woman.
What a nice team you two make. And how lovely to work with your husband. I love that.
So that's my own personal defense system. People say, "How do you protect yourself?" And some people say, "Well, I protect myself in a bubble of light." And Lynn Buchanan would laugh because he said when they were in the unit, they sometimes brought psychics in who would say, "I'm going to protect myself with a bubble of light." He said, "You might as well wear a beacon, because that's going to attract all the remote viewers to remote view you if you have a bubble of light around you." I don't sit there and create bubbles of light or do anything like that, but I do feel that what I ingest is really important. So if I'm watching, I don't watch negative, violent movies. I don't watch anything that involves cruelty. And I do even to some extent try to limit what comes into my awareness. Sometimes you can't help it, but stuff comes into your awareness that like what covert problem programs are happening or what experiments are being done, and you kind of go, yikes, that's a little scary. But at the same time, then I'm not going to sit there and dive into it, into all the what ifs. Like, what if that leads to, whatever. I can't do that because all I can do is live one day at a time and trust that I'm here for a purpose. And once my time is up, I'm going to move on. And I've heard enough near death experiencers talk about, and I've had my own near death experience. So I feel like once we move on from here, all this is going to feel like a dream. And so sometimes I just don't take it too seriously, to be honest. I just say, I'm just not going to take this that seriously.
I
I
like
hope that
that you
helped. I don't
mentioned
know.
being positive in effect may be, for lack of a better term, the best defense.
Mhm. And I don't mean in a Pollyanna way. I'm aware that all these things are happening, but I'm just like, well, I'm going to segment those out right now because like right now I'm going to sit down and do my session, or right now I'm going to sit down and do a live stream with people I love. And so, all those other things don't have to be in the room with me right now. I can deal with them later.
And that takes a certain ability to get to that point as well with your consciousness, right? To be able to get to that state of being. Did you have to develop that, Lori, or is that kind of natural to who you are?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. I mean, I was in a religious cult for 20 years, and they didn't put up with a lot of self-pity and stuff like that. You had to really work on, you just need to get the victory, sister, and rebuke the devil, okay? So that kind of thinking, it sounds hilarious now, but to be honest, that kind of thinking really does help you kind of go, okay. And then since I got out of that cult, I've had to learn to actually, okay, what do I do with negative feelings? What do I do with grief? You can't just say they don't exist and I'm going to push that away. I've learned you do need to honor those emotions and sit with them. And I've learned EFT. I love apps like the Tapping Solution, the Miracle Morning. So if you keep yourself,
Emotional freedom technique. It's using
yes,
acupressure, cognitive form of
right.
cognitive,
Tapping, yes, and there's an app called the Tapping Solution. I'm not an affiliate. I'm not making money from it. I just love it and I use it all the time. So there's the Tapping Solution. There's the Calm app that has all kinds of wonderful meditations and things like that. There's also the Miracle Morning app. So these are all things that I use on a regular basis to stay uplifted because I realize you can't draw from an empty well. You can't run on empty. You have to have gas. So I find that I've got to fill myself up with positive things and journaling too. Journaling when you feel mad, journaling when you're sad, journaling when you're happy. Journaling is really healthy because it really gets those things, keeps, just like we need to keep our blood circulating, we got to keep that energy moving. And exercise is really important too. Getting physical exercises is huge for avoiding depression and dark entities and that kind of thing.
right, right. And I know, Jeff, we've had Robert Falconer, who's been a guest, and he talks a lot about that, of course, dark forces are real, according to him, and many guests who've been on New Thinking Aloud. And he talks about how our internal state of awareness is a reflection of how we're going to interact or not interact with that. So he talks about working with yourself is really paramount. So thank you for
That's,
outlining what
yeah,
is.
and I don't even know who that person is, but that's what I found too. It's not that they don't exist. It's just that how are you going to handle it?
Yeah.
You have two choices. I'm going to really be such a bright light and resist it, or I'm going to just succumb to it, and that's a choice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't have to be victims. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Here's a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Catrian. And I'm assuming Catrian is a female name, who says, if I wanted to learn just for my own journey through life and possibly to help people close to me, how would I get started?
Oh man, We have so many things for you, Katrien. You can go that are free, completely free. You can go to the website and there's a tab that says free stuff and it's got a whole bunch of things on it. And then there's also a tab that says get started here. That's a great place to get started. Then we also have a free 4-part course in remote viewing where you actually go. I teach like a ton of stuff over 4 days, and you get all kinds of information. And at the end, you do your own remote viewing session, and it's completely free. And it's not a sales pitch, it's a true class because my goal when I created it was for people to experience remote viewing without having to pay for it. And then if you go deeper,
Intuitivespecialists.com.
right, intuitivespecialist.com is the website. It's https:// with an s.com. And you can go there and there's the master classes right there. It'll pop right up at the top. You'll see it, free masterclass. So there's a free stuff, and then there's free masterclass. And then there's the blogs. I teach a ton of classes in those blogs. There's written classes in the blogs. If you look through my blogs, and you'll see the blog tab. We're redesigning the website, and it should be out this year, completely redesigned and much easier to navigate. But right now, though, you'll see those tabs, and they are there, and there's a lot of free stuff. I do want to warn people because there's some stuff out. I mean, so much things on the internet now, right? And there's a lot of weird stuff, and people call a lot of things remote viewing, and a lot of people even call things CRV that are not CRV. And there's people out there that don't have the best motives. So really do make sure that you're checking the source of the information when you go searching, like, how can I get started? Because not everything is on the up and up. But you can trust Lynn Buchanan, and you can trust my website. Lynn Buchanan's website is crviewer.com. So it's just CR and then the word viewer.com. And he also has a free resources tab on his website as well. So so there's some good free stuff out there that you can trust that is at those two websites.
I'd
Wonderful.
also like to suggest to people that if they want to get started, that they consider joining the International Remote Viewing Association.
Yes, that's true. The International Remote Viewing Association, Deborah Katz is the president, and she and I are really good friends. Gail Husick is a former student of mine who also studied with Lynn. I think she's even worked some with Paul Smith, and she is a retired Harvard educated attorney. And she has been offering some great little classes on, I mean, I'm saying little because I don't think they're real long classes, but she has some courses on that are on the International Remote Viewing Association website. And also I've been offering a monthly class for $49 every month. It's usually about an hour and a half long, but they're like mini classes, and we call them flash focus classes. Those are also less expensive and offer valuable how-to things. And so, yeah, so if you're in the community hanging out with, IRVA and, checking out the Intuitive Specialist and CR Viewer websites, you're in a good pool, and there's enough there to keep you busy for years. So,
Well, thank you for those resources. Yes, and Deborah Lynn Katz, not only is she the president of the International Remote Viewing Association, she's one of our very cherished guest hosts here on New Thinking Aloud, along with Leanne Whitney and Christopher Naughton. And we just have a couple minutes left. Can I sneak in another question? So this
Sure.
is, I'm asking this question because the moderators are letting me know that many people in the chat have been curious about this question. And this comes from Freeman, who says, is astral projecting the same as remote viewing or out of body experience? Or can you share what you've come to understand about in remote viewing? Is the remote viewer going to the target? Is the information coming to them? How do you see that operating and functioning?
I love that question. And Freeman, if you go onto the blogs on my website, I actually have an article about what's the difference between out of body experience and astral projection and remote viewing. And it really outlines in detail the differences. But since we only have a couple minutes, just to give you a quick overview of the differences, in controlled remote viewing, no part of us is leaving our body and going to the site. The subconscious mind is always connected into this matrix of where all this information is. And you can just, it's like radio waves. We're bouncing off that information and the subconscious goes ping, ping and brings it back. And then the conscious mind interprets it and writes it down. So that is not astral projection or out of body. Out of body, of course, a part of you is actually leaving your body. And so that's the big distinction between controlled remote viewing. Now, there is a type of remote viewing called extended remote viewing. And in extended remote viewing, there is some people are of the opinion that we are doing a bit of perhaps out of, astral projection or whatever. But I have had astral projection and OBEs my whole life, and they're very different from my remote viewing experiences. Totally, completely different.
How would you characterize that difference?
The one difference is that there's less control in astral projecting when you can, and there's no part of you aware of your body. When you're astral projecting, you are experiencing whatever you're experiencing, and you're not even thinking about your body at all. Your body's back there somewhere, and you're out flying around, and you're completely unlimited. You're like a ghost. No one can see you, and you can somersault. And there have been documented cases where people have been seen, but they're seen like a ghost, even though they're still living. Whereas with CRV, you're sitting at your chair, and even if you bilocate, where bilocation by definition, when we're talking about CRV, is where a part of you is really at the target and getting all this information, but you haven't physically left your body. It's just mentally you're experiencing the target, but you're always at the same time writing on the piece of paper and still aware that you're sitting in a room at a table. So you're getting great information at the same time that you're sitting in your chair. So that was Ingo's definition of bilocation.
And do you ascribe to, for example, quantum entanglement as far as, or that we're all interconnected, or how do you think this information is moving around and for you to be able to focus and others to receive this information?
I definitely think we're all entangled. And even in my mediumship work, when I would get amazing information that there's no way I could know, and I would be getting all this, I'd be like, am I really talking to a dead person? Or is it just that we're all connected? Even in cases of reincarnation, I've had experiences where I was someone else in a different lifetime, and I'm like, okay, am I just picking up on that person's life and getting that information, or was I that person? I'm not sure, but I do know that we are definitely all connected in some way. For sure, we are all connected. So if I hurt you, I'm hurting myself, right? So we are definitely connected in ways that a lot of people are not aware of.
Well, Lori, it's been a great joy to be with you during this live stream event. I've loved every one of our interviews. I encourage our viewers to check the New Thinking Aloud listings page. We have more than half a dozen interviews with you, and I hope to have you back on New Thinking Aloud many, many times. It's always a joy.
I always love coming to your house. They feed you really well at Jeffrey's. But yeah, it's always so much fun. And we always have such interesting conversations too. So thanks so much. I'm honored to be here with everyone. And I really appreciate everyone's questions too. They were so intelligent. Let's do more of this. That would be great.
We will be very happy to do more. And before we close, I just want to mention for viewers that New Thinking Aloud publishes a weekly email newsletter. You can subscribe to it for free at the New Thinking Aloud Foundation website, which is New Thinking Aloud, ALLOWED, all one word, .org. And at that website, you can also get free copies. You can download free PDF copies of our quarterly magazine, or you can even purchase printed copies of the quarterly magazine. So if you're a follower of New Thinking Aloud, or you would like to get advance information about all of our videos for the coming week, I encourage you to check out our weekly newsletter.
It's been a joy being with both of you, Lori Williams and Jeffrey Mishlove, and all the viewers and listeners. Thank you for all of your questions. And thank you all for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.